They do snake dances. They do, I forget all the dances.
There's traditional, there's jingle dress dances,
Yeah.
there's grass dancers, there's a bunch of different kinds of dances. And the dancers, traditional, is more for the elderly. It's they get dressed up in costume, and the traditional dance for men is mimicking a bird. And that's how you see them walking around and doing all this other stuff. Anybody can do traditional, but it's for the elderly, and same thing for the women. The women just do a step, and they're all dressed up in their gowns and everything. It's just something really beautiful to see. And when you get into a grass dancer, that's my young kids, because it's a really fast-paced dance. And I don't know how they get through it, man. You got to be 16 years old or something to do that. And then they also and the dance goes all the way down through just the kids that can just learn to walk. They're out there in costume and dancing and walking around. The jingle dress dances are there's like little bells on their dresses, and there's 364 bells on it, and then they bounce up and down, so all these bells go, and then they're all being judged as who's the best dancer. Plus, they judge their costumes. Mm-hmm. They make their own costumes.
Wow.
Yeah, they call that dance the jingle dance.
Yeah, the jingle dress dance. Yep. And it is, and then they have dances where anybody, doesn't matter what culture you are, where you're from, or anything. If you want to go down on the floor and dance, you just go.
So do they do that for religious purposes, or do they do it just for fun, or do they do it for celebrating
something? It's just culture. That's what the culture is.
It's like a state fair in a way.
Okay.
Something like that.
You have they have drummer competitions here in the United States. On our reservation, it's just basically for our Six Nations. But when you come here in the United States, there could be 100 different tribes. So they have different drummers, and they have competitions with the drummers. The other thing that they do is they have flutes. Mm-hmm. Some of the most beautiful music you'll ever hear. It's very soothing, relaxing. And they play modern tunes and everything, but they make their own flutes. Wow. And if you ever get the opportunity to listen to some of this flute music, these guys are fabulous, and they're all over the YouTube. You can find them on YouTube.
They had a theater out there in the open. I don't know if it's still going yet. Me and Ma were there, and they portray something that happened in the past, like an outdoor theater is what it is. You get a creek running through it and whatever. And then they spray it with mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are bad. Mother went down there, and we was camping on the Chiefswood Park, they call it. And she went to take a shower, and when she came back, she said, "The mosquitoes are really big in here. They leave shadows," she said.
They did up at your house too. The flies were like that.
Flies were like birds, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions. Do you celebrate any holidays that are different than the traditional American holidays?
No, yeah.
New Year, what is that? Can you tell us what that is?
New Year is like Halloween. The kids, mostly kids I've never ever seen a grown person go door to door. As a kid, we take a little bag and walk, and it's Easter or New Year's cold, and you walk up these, like I say, might be 5 houses in a half mile or so. So you just walk all day, well, till you get tired, I guess. We went around one concession and came back home. And when you knock on the door, whoever hollers New Year first, the one person that hollered first, you gotta give me something. If I hollered first, if you hollered first, then I have to give you something.
Mm-hmm. And what did you usually give or get?
Cookies and stuff like that, apple and what have you. But it was something to do, I suppose, too.
It sounds like fun.
Get the kids out of the house for a while.
Now, the last question that I have is it's more of a story. I have heard this story personally myself, and I would love for you to share the story about the war woman with the shawl. Could you tell us about that?
About Polly Cooper.
What?
Polly Cooper.
The story of Polly
All
Cooper.
right, you don't know about Polly Cooper? Polly Cooper, I learned this from the Smithsonian Institute. Polly Cooper, when George Washington was in Valley Forge with the troops and everything, and during that winter, they were having a hard time trying to survive, and the Oneida Indians came down to help them and show them how to survive that winter. And they would work with them and show them everything. And Polly Cooper was the chief's wife, and she became George Washington's cook. And whenever there was a battle or something, she hated violence. And so what she would do is she would take buckets of water when there was a war or there was shooting going on, and she would go and help all the wounded she could from both sides, the British and the American. Well, both sides got to know who she was, and no one would fire upon her. And they just kind of, if she needed help, they would help her. But she was out there to help all the wounded and everything. Well, after the war was over, George Washington wanted to repay her for what kindness she did, and wanted to took her to Boston, and had an entourage take her through Boston to buy anything she wanted. She said she didn't want anything. And he made her go anyway, so she went through there, and they're window shopping through Boston, and she come across this black shawl. She said, "That's what I want." So the United States government had bought her this black shawl. From what I understand, it's still on our reservation today, and I think it's through the Pauluses have them. I don't know where it is or anything, but that's what the Smithsonian told me about her. And there is a bronze statue of her, the chief, and George Washington in the Smithsonian. It's a big, must be 8-10 feet tall. So if you ever go there, it's there. And then they have that's where I got this story from. And then if they're sponsoring our tribe, they'll take all the foods and everything. When you go down in the cafeteria, they make it there, and you can buy the foods that we ate of the period and everything. So it was quite a story, and you can research it. And another one to research would be, oh gosh, I keep forgetting his name. He's buried up there by the Mohawk Chapel. He went to England and got educated and came over here, and he's the one who got our reservation from Queen Elizabeth. What was his name? Joseph Brant. And what the deal was is the English wanted us to fight for them, and somebody else wanted to fight for them, and so being he was educated and everything, he says, well, what's in it for us? All the other Indians were just fighting. He says, what's in it for us? I got 6 nations here. And the English come up with this 6 square miles along the Brant River. And the Queen says, if you fight for us, this will be your land. And it's still our land today.
Wow.
That's where we were born.
Very cool stories.
Yeah,
Well,
Queen Anne put some silver in that church when it's supposed to be the first church in Ontario, or whether it is, stories. And it's been trying to burn it down in the last 5 years 3 times. And I went and seen the scorches on the side of the building and whatever. But
That's where you guys got married, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mohawk Chapel?
yeah,
Wow.
got a picture of it.
There's 6 different tribes in there. I don't know if I can remember them all, but I think there's the Iroquois.
Iroquois
Is the
nation.
right reservation, right? And then there's the Onondaga, Seneca, Oneida, Mohawk. That's 4. Cayugas, and I can't remember the last one.
It slips my mind too. A lot of things been slipping my mind lately.
Yeah, mine too. But each tribe had different clans in them. Ours had 3. I think it was the wolf, the bear, and the turtle. And
They
we're
had
of
the
the
turtle.
clan.
Your dad's
You're
a
of the turtle clan?
So
So
is he.
do you see turtles as something special?
What it is a turtle is the world is on the turtle's back. The turtle is all wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what the turtle represents for us. It's just an all-knowing wisdom thing. This is the story I get. And I have an Indian blanket that's got the turtle on it. It's got all 6 tribes on it, but I ain't seen it in just sitting in the closet. It's all colorful, all Indian colors on it and everything, so you don't really want to get it too dirty, because I took it in to get it clean one time and they wouldn't touch it. No. So, and the story about the blanket, it was Easter, and he was in our living room, and it snowed, and I hid a T-shirt of his, and I put it inside the blanket.
What's
And
that?
he hunted through the whole
Picture
house
of
looking
our
for
wedding.
his Easter gift. Never
Really?
did
I don't think
find
I've
it.
seen it.
He was mad, but his sister Tanya found her dress.
Uh-huh.
I hung it on the back side of the curtains. When they
That's
opened the curtains, the
crazy.
dress would go away and close it. Finally, he was so mad and everything, and he looked in the blanket, but he didn't open it all the way up, and that's where it was.
This is the church. That's her brother's car.
Jason.
This is the church we got married in.
What is that church called?
Chapel.
78 years ago.
What was the name of the church though?
Mohawk
Chapel.
Church.
Mohawk Chapel.
They have a school right next to that too. That where when the whites were trying to annihilate the Indians more, they made a school. The Indians weren't allowed to speak their language. They were
English language?
No, Indian.
Oh, they weren't allowed to
Indian.
speak Indian? Oh, okay.
They wouldn't let them speak.
You had to cut your hair. Weren't allowed long hair.
Wow.
And they made them dress different.
Yeah, you couldn't dress in your traditional garb.
What they were trying to do was to, like Hitler did. He had the Hitler Youth, and that's a good way to go if you want to change a nation, I suppose, or a culture or whatever, is to get the kids and make them do what they're not used to doing. And some will run away, some stayed. My sisters were in there. My mother, one night, when we lived in Brantford, she woke up. She said, something's wrong. So she walked up to the Mohawk Institute, and my sisters both had their hands, they had like a beating on their hand, like everybody at that time used to get. So that when that happened, Mother took them out, and they didn't have to go back there no more.
Good. I'm glad
Well, it was a farm.
Yeah.
It was a farm. And they made a lot of their own food and stuff like that. But we lived just down the street from there. And now they got a museum there. If you ever go to Brantford, go see that museum.
Do you know what it's called?
It's the Mohawk Institute.
Mohawk Institute?
Yeah. And they also got my hometown, Graham Bell, Alexander.
Yeah, his house. It's there.
His house is there.
Alexander Graham Bell's house is in your hometown?
Yep.
Wow.
That's where he was from.
And
Wow.
they lived up on Tootla Heights. And he made the first long distance call to Paris that was 7 miles away. And he had to go to Toronto on the lines and come back to Paris to talk to somebody in Paris.
Wow.
Paris is a little town outside of Brantford. It's about
It's
7
about
miles
7.
away.
About
Wow.
7 miles away, yeah.
Very
But
cool.
Brantford that's where Gretzky lives too. Or
Yeah, it's Gretzky. I don't know why it's still Brantford. It should be called Gretzky. Everything there is Gretzky. There's hockey rinks all over the place.
My brother used to teach him. He was his coach, but he coached him in class instead of hockey. He's seen him at one of these places not too years ago now, maybe 20 years ago or more, and Gretzky gave him a signed hockey stick. So I don't know whatever happened to it though.
Wow.
There's some famous people that are from the reservation, like Graham Greene. You've probably seen him in Dances with Wolves and stuff. He's from our reservation, and so is Jerry Longboat. He was an Olympic runner. And there's a few others. I just don't remember who they are right now. But there's a lot of famous people that came from our reservation.
I think Tom Longboat died the night you were born.
Died
I think.
Wouldn't know.
He
I was
doesn't
just
remember.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing all this amazing information. This was such an awesome
I
opportunity.
want to show
for
you
me.
something before you leave,
Sure.
if I can find it.
Okay.
Need help?
The end of